Morning, everyone. It's great to see so many faces in the meeting, old and new. So welcome, everybody. So this is going to be the second, as Francesco was saying, the second open meeting of the AIM, Artificial Intelligence and Music Working Group. And well, I'm just gonna share a couple of slides to give a very, very quick recap. Let's see. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we see that.
Okay, fantastic. So as I was saying, welcome to the meeting. Enrico and I are the co-chairs of the working group. And in case you want to follow the presentation, in your own laptop, because we have plenty of links and interesting resources. That's the link to the slides themselves, so you can open them if you wish so. So this is us. I'm Albert. I'm a lecturer in computer science at the Distributed AI Group of the Informatics Department at King's College London. And Enrico is here too. Enrico, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Enrico Daga. I'm Research Fellow at Knowledge Media Institute of the Open University.
Fantastic. Thanks, Enrico. So just a quick recap of what are the objectives of this working group. So as we indicate, I mean, we've given this many rounds, right? With Enrico and with many other people in the first meeting. But the general idea of the working group is to bridge communities, right? So we want to connect people and want to connect institutions that are somewhat working in the satellite space of music and artificial intelligence. And there, that's a big space, as we will see in hopefully in the meeting today, because we've seen it before already, regarding it could be music generation, or it could be sentiment analysis in music, or it could be lyric semantic enhancement. It could be many different things. But the basic idea is that there is this core of music and AI, and we want to understand the communities around it and what their concerns are and what the topics that they are working on and researching on are, and mainly to promote not just communication, but also the reuse and sharing of tools, data, and methods, right? So we want to sort of activate this ecosystem of reusable artifacts across people, between people using doing music and AI. And then at the same time, we also, so besides this, sharing of experiences and tools and data, we also want to encourage and satisfy the outreaching needs of academics, industry, individuals, just having an open forum for people to communicate about these issues. To do that, we have a couple of resources. I know many of you are familiar with them, but just in case, a quick recap on them. We have a website, ai-music.org, where we just introduce the group. We also have a couple of interesting links. We keep a list of the entries to the previous meetings that we've had. We have a mailing list that we use to keep track of the size of the community. It's around 90 people now. So I think we're reaching a very sweet spot where we have people mainly from Europe, but also from elsewhere, with many different interests and say, topics in mind when it comes to AI and music. So, and it's very diverse also in terms of the origin of the institution. So we have universities, we have companies, we have NGOs. So it's really diverse. And then we also have a Google Drive that you can access just clicking that link, where we just keep the meeting notes and minutes and reports that we send to the DARIAH board and all of those things in case you're interested. Then there you go, the link for this meeting agenda and notes, which is exactly what Enrico and I shared in the open call for this meeting. You can access that document, and we'll be reusing the last part of the document just to fill it in with the notes and with the topics that we'll be discussing today. And in case it helps, we've also linked there for you the notes resulting from the previous meeting, where we also had an interesting interaction about, what's the interest of the community, what brings us here, what are we all doing around AI and music. All right, that covers the first item of the agenda, because the idea was just to give you the welcome and access to all these links. And essentially what Enrico and I wanted to do today is to have this lightning talk session, right? So, and I think, so the idea for this was to collect the descriptions of the projects, labs, papers, anything that you've been working on so far on AI and music. And so far we only got 2, but there is definitely more than 2 in this meeting. So we thought that this could be just an extended introduction session where, you don't need to even share slides. You can just, speak up, and we can go one by one, have a introduction round of, say, 3 to 5 minutes each. And then, we can just take notes and interact with each other and see what everyone is doing. So I think that would be really, really useful for the goals of the working group. And we'll spend around 45 minutes on that. So we should be done by, say, 1/2 past. And then around the last half hour of the meeting, we wanted to invest in just taking all that we've discussed in that big introduction round. I don't think we can call it lightning talk session anymore. In that big introduction round, and then see where we can go with that, right? So Enrico and I discussed the possibility of writing a white paper together, right? Just making a statement and saying, okay, this is what we think is important about AI and music, that it's not being addressed by, other communities or other researchers. And see what comes out of that. It could be that we say, okay, there's no need for a white paper, for a white paper, the community is, is well organized, but it would be nice to submit a workshop paper, for example, somewhere else, because we are all very concerned with this very specific area of AI and music, for example, right? So it's just about having some time for open discussion about a shared publication that we can all co-author and, and sort of bring the community closer together. And then we can use the last 5 to 10 minutes for anything else that we've left undiscussed. And what are your wishes for the working group? What do you think would be useful to discuss in a third working group meeting, and things like that. So, in general, any other business. All right. Are there any questions so far? I'm not sure I can see everyone. Yeah, yes, I can. Okay, fantastic. Then, okay, so then if there are no questions, let's just get started with the lightning talks / extended introductions session. I know because I have it in the, I'll stop sharing my screen right now. Okay, now we can see each other much better. I know from the submissions to the notes, and by the way, before we start, I'm just gonna paste the link to the document where we'll be taking notes. Oh, I see many of you there already. There we go. So if you scroll all the way down to in this document, there is some space for us to take notes. And then the idea now would be that as we go introducing ourselves and saying what we're doing, perhaps it's an idea to just check what people are saying about their interests and their institutions and their labs and their papers and their projects, and see if those are covered by that list of topics that we are inheriting from the first working group meeting, right? And see if, you know, that is covered by music on the web, or music interpretations, or ethical issues around AI and music, which I find fascinating, and so on, right? So it's just very openly, don't be shy, just jump into the document, throw whatever you think is being said, right, or is missing, and we'll just get the ball rolling. So I'll with all the intention, I'll leave the music AI related projects for Polish folk music collections from our friends in Poland for not for last, but for penultimate, because we should really be last, I think, Enrico, in introducing Polyphonia. So we have two, say, project pitches at the end. Who would like to start introducing him or herself?
Hello.
Eva and Ivan, I think you drew. You both asked at the same time. So Eva, do you want to go?
Yeah. Well, if I can, of course.
Sure, absolutely.
I didn't raise my hand. So a few words, because we have submitted our abstract. So I would like to introduce our group. Unfortunately, I am only on myself as a representative of those people mentioned in the document. So I am Eva Łukasik from Poznań University of Technology, Institute of Computing Science, and I would say that it is a strong computing science institute, heavily directed into artificial intelligence and machine learning. Of course, are there other subjects too, but this is a very strong group. As a matter of audio, I must say that it's a small group, mainly represented by myself. But I must say that after the years of struggling with my students, I can see that nowadays the interest of students in audio, maybe because of the artificial intelligence, is stronger and stronger. So sorry, I didn't switch off my...
Yeah, Eva, indeed, we can't hear you very well. Can you maybe speak closer to the
microphone? Yeah, is it okay now?
It's better, much
maybe
better.
I put my headset. Yeah. Is it better now?
Yeah, and try not touch the mic. And I think it's much better anyway now. Yeah.
Sorry. And now?
It's good.
It's good.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. Thanks,
okay.
Eva.
So this is about myself and the other people. As you can see, this is the Institute of Art, Magda Hudy, and some people from Poznań Computing and Networking Center. And we in Poland, some years ago, officially 3 years ago, I think, we created a group, Music Information Retrieval. And we are gathered around the folk music in Poland, traditional music in Poland, and Institute of Art of Polish Academy of Science has a huge collection of traditional music recordings and strong ethnographical research. So what we want to do, we want to digitize, well, it is digitized, but we want to use the MIR methods to analyze and to popularize it in the group of ethnomusicologists. Yeah, so I don't want to speak too long, but I only want to mention that after just 3 years of like voluntary work, we now are very rich in projects, because first of them is DARIAH-PL, which has the aim of creating distributed labs related to digital humanities, and we are developing some methods for computer, well, digital musicology. And the second one is related to enriching the Federation of Digital Libraries that is run by Poznań Supercomputing Center into the optical music recognition methods, because there are plenty of a huge collection of musical documents, as well as optical text recognition. So this is a 2-year program. And in fact, we have a third one, which is financed by DARIAH itself within the DARIAH theme, 1-year project that we are going to finalize it soon. And it is related to the discovery of needs of Polish folk groups, their needs in digital infrastructures. So we are really very, very busy. So we didn't prepare any slides for today, but we are open to discuss various things. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that, Ewa. I think there are many common areas with at least with the things that Enrico and I are seeing happening.
Yeah, I can see that a lot of common lines. Yeah.
Very good. Thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ewa. Ivan, do you want to give it a go?
Yes, sure. Hi, everyone. So my name is Ivan Magraciagnolo, and I'm very happy to be a new member of this group. So I'm a member of a laboratory based in Marseille, in the south of France, called the PRISM Laboratory, PRISM. And it's a pretty recent lab that was created like officially 2 years ago, but had been existing for a couple of more years. So let's say now 3-4 years of existence. And it was co-created by Aix-Marseille University and the CNRS, which is a big research center in France, with the aim of working on the interactions between art and science. So the main focus of the lab is sound, music, and images. And we have like basically 3 research groups at the moment. One is really focused on acoustic and perception. The other one is really focused on practice as research and musicology and all aspects around the creation process itself. And the third group is more about phenomenology on one hand, and also any kind of societal applications of the work we do in the lab, including health, well-being, and stuff like that. As for myself, so I am a researcher with CNRS. I'm also an artist. So my main focus is about articulating artistic creation and research, like probably some of you as well. And my number one topic of research is really the creative process. And I handle that from different perspectives, different angles. One of them is phenomenology, which means the creative process as a lived experience. So what are we going through when we create something, be it art or be it research or be it anything else? Another aspect of my work is in cognitive sciences, and particularly all the enactive theories, which is really one of my main focus in cognitive sciences. I also work a lot on pedagogy and particularly inactive pedagogy. Also the paradigm of practice as research, because obviously I'm also a practitioner, and so I'm trying to articulate the two things together, how my research inform my creation and how my creation inform my research. And also more recently, so I won't have a lot to say about it yet, but the use of artificial intelligence, particularly AI and creativity. So how can artificial intelligence help the creative process? So that's really one of my main focus. I'm also a member, and that might be interesting to create an articulation between the two groups, I don't know, but I'm part of a group of research called AI, Internet, AI and Society. And they have several working groups, and one of them is about AI and creativity. So it's not specifically on music, but music is part of it. But I just wanted to mention that. So in terms of my interest with artificial intelligence, the first part of my career was in voice technologies. So I did a lot of machine learning, and I did some work on neural network at the time. Of course, it was before big data and deep learning. So the technologies have evolved a lot, and I would really need to update myself, but that's not necessarily my main goal. But so I really wanted to revisit those technologies, but linking them to creativity. So, which is for me a way to connect my new interest with my former interests, which makes sense to me. And I'm not working specifically on music, it's part of it, but I'm also working on images and also on moving images. There are mainly two projects that I'm currently getting started with inside my lab, which relate to AI, but I have a few more in mind. One of them is about image sonification. So the idea is I'm working in art video as well, and the idea is to try to find ways to articulate the generation of images and the generation of sounds, and possibly to generate the generation of sounds from information that we can take out of the images. So it's really getting started. I do that with two colleagues of mine, but we are more like right now exploring the state of the art and trying to think of some experimentations we could do. The other topic I'm interested in, and I saw that some people are already specialized in that field, because I worked a lot on audio indexing and information retrieval in audio like documents. I'm very interested in the separation of music and voice, and particularly singing voice. So this is also a topic that I recently started to explore. So I'm still more in the process of reading and doing some state of the art. And the third thing I already mentioned is really about how AI can help the creative process. For instance, I'm looking at flow machines developed by Sony, which to me is something very interesting. I like this idea of trying to find ways to generate something. To me, it's very important also to, and I will conclude with that, it's also very important for me to reflect at the same time on the ethical dimension of using artificial intelligence, because AI has been used to justify a lot of things from the GAFAs, among others. And I think it's also very important as scientists to keep this reflection alive and be clear. And maybe if we were to write a white paper, that would probably be a chapter or in the paper, is really to reflect on these implications and also make clear that we are using it as a tool that is always supervised by human beings with some goals in mind, and the goals have to be really clear. I think that's something very important. And that's probably also my philosopher hat that peaks when I say that, but to me it's a very important topic to keep in mind. And I guess that's about it for today, or for now at least.
Excellent. Many thanks for this, Ivan. Really lots of interesting stuff. I have a couple of questions, but first I think Jacopo in the chat was asking if the Prism group. So is it the Prism group with RNCM or is it another group?
Oh, it's something different. It's really like a new lab that was created a couple of years ago. So it has, in France, we call that UMR, which stands for Joint Lab between CNRS and University. And it was labeled like officially by the institutions 2 years ago. Yeah, this is the link, but the website is like a work in progress at the moment. We are actually refounding it and we hired someone to do it. So if you visit it like 3 or 4 months from now, that should be like really representing the state of the lab. Right now, it's more representing what it used to be like 2 or 3 years ago when we founded it. But yeah, still that can give you some ideas about who are in the lab and some of the work we do.
Very, very good. Thank you for that. So I thought you know, you spoke about lots of interesting things, but one thing that really caught my eye was this study of what creativity is, right? And I think that's a very interesting question. I think in a lot of scientific communities around AI and music, there is this sort of major simplification of creativity, right? And I think in other projects I've been involved with, we are studying the social processes behind, in this case, interpreting data, right? So in what ways we socially interpret data differently. And I think this is very related and very much on that line, right? So what do we know about creativity? What do we know about social processes behind creativity and how they work? So I thought that's a very distinctive aspect of what you're doing. So I have only one very short question about it's pure curiosity, but you said you used the AI to support creativity. Do you also do it the other way around? So do you use creativity, for example, what you know about creativity for science in a as an application of creativity?
It's a very interesting question. First, I want to just react very quickly on creativity, and I totally agree with you. I think that it's one of those concepts that people use a lot, but without almost never defining it and expliciting what is behind it. And in my research, I noticed that people can put a lot of different things behind the word creativity, and we are really speaking sometimes of entirely different things because it really depends on the point of view. And so I think it's very interesting. And of course, I have no pretension of giving a definite answer on the topic. But one thing I noticed is that a lot of models were created about creativity, but most of them are coming from the cognitivist movement. And the aim is mostly to create some automatized approaches to creativity. But they are not really, from my experience and from my work on phenomenology, they are not really describing the process as it is really lived through by a human being creating something. So I think it's a very interesting thing to keep in mind because, as Albert said, the concept of creativity is much richer than any reduction we could do, even though we know that we do these reductions to be able to do some research and move on. And it's okay as long as we are aware of it and we disclaim it at the beginning of the work. As far as the link between creativity and AI and a way to go back and forth, I think is very interesting. As I said, I'm not only interested in creativity for artists, even though that's one of my main interests as an artist, but I'm also very interested in creativity for scholars, researchers, scientists, because I have a feeling, and again, I'm not advanced enough to really conclude about it, but I have a feeling that a lot of things are similar in the process. The aim is quite different, but I have a feeling that the process is quite similar. And actually, I just submitted an ERC advanced grant to tackle that question, and So we'll see if the EU is interested in that parallel question and the methodology that I proposed. But yeah, I think it's very interesting. As far as the impact on AI on that, yeah, probably, I mean, my idea behind my interest in the connection between AI and creativity is that AI can be both like a step or some stages in that creative process, but can also be a tool to look at it, to observe it, to classify maybe some data about it. And I'm not quite sure how to do that, but your question is very relevant, because I really think that there are some opportunities here. And also what I like about AI is the fact that sometimes, not always, not often, but sometimes it gives you a new direction about a problem that you didn't think about it. It's not right. Solving it, but it indicating that maybe there is a correlation at some point where you absolutely had no idea that maybe there could be a connection there. Or
very good. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much for that, Ivan. That was inspiring. I have more to say, but in the interest of time, we should really move on. So Francesca observed creativity is also a social process. AI can be an agent too in the creative process. I fully agree. But you have Enrico there, you know, with really willing to comment on what you said.
Yeah, I got excited while you were describing the relation between creativity and research. I strongly believe that the processes through which we build things and we produce things are not essentially different from what artists do, and this is also one of the typical conversations we have with PhD students, right? So you need to be worried about your research narrative, but you do not have that research narrative to force too much what you're going to do, because you have the process of doing things is much more fluid, iterative, and there's a lot of waste. For example, you do many things that you may not reuse in the end, and I think these things are very, very similar to what a creative process is. So I really think the EU should find.
But that's true. Yeah, when I was doing my PhD, I feel like pages and pages of notebooks, and in the end, I only use a little part of it. So.
Yeah, but I think that's exactly how typically a creative process is. I mean, we if we want to write a song, we write a lot of stuff, and then only in some sort of evolutionary process, there are some things that remain and grow, others that die, and it's fine. So maybe there are a lot of parallels also in how the social system of research works, so no, my question is merely pragmatic to a certain extent. So anyway, you need to publish when you do research in creativity and computing, right? And clearly computer science research is a lot experimental and driven through quantitative evaluations. So how do you evaluate the role research on creativity, computational creativity, and?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, it's for me it's very interesting, because I moved in a way from like what we call art sciences to humanities, and so the methodologies are very different. And so I moved from an area where everything was measured by percentages and statistical relevances. And now I'm more navigating in a place where qualitative methods are abundantly used. And it's actually something we are really reflecting inside my lab, because of the two culture that we are trying to merge and make work together. And it's very interesting to think about that, because what constitutes a good qualitative methodology, and how can you relate to some degree some of these qualitative approaches to some quantitative measures or results. And honestly, I'm not quite sure yet how to do that. I just know how to do one and the other, but I'm not quite sure yet how they can have a dialogue together. And I think that's a very epistemological questions about first interdisciplinary research, and also about the links between art and science, and more generally between like hard science approaches and humanities approaches. But I'll let you know if I find some good clues.
Thank you for your input. I think this is really essential for and it's very relevant for the type of problems this working group may be interested into, and also with an eye on the white paper, I suppose.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Logical issues are kind of one of the reasons why it is difficult for communities that come from different expertise to work together, and this is kind of
I think the epistemological question is always central to any type of research, in my opinion. But
absolutely, fantastic. Thanks very much for this very interesting, Ivan. And there are a couple, and just as Enrico said, I think there's a lot that we need to take into account from this discussion in the paper discussion. So let's talk about that a little bit later. I want to move on to the people that haven't spoken yet. So Lars, Emon, Jin, if whoever wants to go next. Okay, Lars, the floor is yours.
Thanks. I'm really not sure if I'm sort of officially a member of the community yet, but if it's possible to be it would be wonderful. But I can talk a bit about where I'm at. I'm at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology in Trondheim, and I have some affiliations there that might be relevant for this group. One thing is that we have a DH lab, or Digital Humanities Lab, that we're trying to build up. So developing this cross-disciplinary thing with trying to develop a community and some tools and some courses and things. The second one is a group, is a committee where we try to develop a digital humanities study at the university. So, and that's an interesting project. What should be in it? How do you build it? How do you build interest if people don't know what things might be? How can they start getting interested in studying it? So that's an interesting project. But my project is both on an early stage and on the late stage. I'm preparing a postdoc application with a project where the main product is an interface, an interaction interface on the web, where that gives musicologists and musicians and editors, for example, the possibility to use machine learning techniques and just gives them access to the possibilities of the computer without themselves being programmers. And this is, I think, a democratic thing as well. Of course, this is not only interesting as an interactive design project, it's also interesting when it comes to how do you represent data in a data model, which also affects how you can analyze data. And then from a philosophy of science perspective, that's interesting because when you have a feedback process, if the first stage is to have automatic tagging of the elements, which category is this, what is, you have a cadence, for example, I mean, all these tagging processes. And then if you include historical theory, well, the music I'm working on is historical music. So if you include historical theories on music, then there are a set of categories in those, the things you expect to learn, to see. So you can say it's supervised learning, for example. Now, we also want to use unsupervised learning, and then the computer makes categories and finds clusters and ideas that we didn't think about. Now, if you put a name on all these ideas that is found, that makes a lexicon, and this lexicon might be fed back into the analysis process. And when you have this feedback, analytical feedback loop, do we understand what's going on after 3 generations of this? Is it a chaotic process? Do you get paradigm shifts where we don't understand what's going on afterwards? And there are also interesting questions around this. And then there's the presentation bit. I personally use Python and Dash, and I think that's very sort of practical, convenient solution. How do you form the interaction for a classically trained musicologist, for example, into these kind of ways of working? How is that done in a convenient way? So that's my project, and I'm working on this. So.
Excellent, super interesting, Lars. Many thanks for that. I just pasted so you got some reactions there. Just wanted to say quickly, if you want to join the DARIAH AIM community, I pasted the link in the chat. It's a Google group. It's really easy to join, and it's moderated, but we basically let everybody in and openly discuss. I thought a lot of what you said makes a lot of sense, and I don't think we have discussed a lot about interfaces in this group, and I think it's definitely a distinctive aspect from other communities that I don't think they give it so much importance. And for example, in Polyphonia, we have started to use as well unsupervised learning for some tasks, and equally same conclusions. Really interesting patterns come up. So. So thank you for that, really. Ivan, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Lars. I have a couple of reactions about what you said. I think it's terrific, and I think there is a technological barrier to the use of those technologies, and most people working in musicology, they are totally foreign to these approaches, and any kind of tool that can help with that, I think is very welcome. That reminds me that there is another project that I would be very interested in, and that's kind of connected to what you said. In my lab, I have some people who worked on semiological approach to music and defining some units, like basic units, and they did it on music, among others, Christine Exclapez. And also, she had a PhD student who actually did that on audiovisual objects, like films and stuff like that, and who found out that the units, when you combine sound and image, are not the same as when you just use sound or you just use images. And I think it's very interesting to apply machine learning and AI approaches to do automatic classification and segmentations, and to find out what kind of relevant information the system is extracting. That being said, people who are experts like musicologues, they usually don't like these kind of approaches, because it's kind of like saying that they are not useful anymore. So in some way, of course, I'm provoking when I say that, but really there is a lot of resistance from people who have a knowledge about it. And if you come up, I remember that because my PhD supervisor has worked a little bit on that in music. He's based in Rennes now. Iriza, and of course he had a lot of resistance from musicologues, because they were musicologists, because they were how can you do something with an automatic system that we were trained years to be able to do, something like that. So I think it's a very interesting topic and approach, and I'm very interested in that as well.
Thank you. Can I just comment 2 things on that? About the resistance first, yes. Sometimes I feel that the presentations one gives in this field has something to do with it. So you see, oh, I did this research and the answer is 42, and so we don't understand the answers. And so how you present the results, I think that's part of what makes it unsexy or sexy, what you want. So one idea was to make that the computer generates articles, for example, because text is a format that people tend to understand. So this is one way of doing it, just doing the presentation of the results in a more delicate way. The second little comment was about the semiology. I think one problem with semiotics in the Umberto Eco sense, for example, is that he, in his system of semiotics, he doesn't really touch upon when the represented and the representations have different ontologies, like I think they have with the sound and scores, for example. So on the sound, Billie Holiday could say blues is such a mixed up thing, you just have to feel it. But in the score, the ontology tends to be hierarchical, for example. Or so then the idea that denotation can be plural, that doesn't sort of fit with the echo. So there are some difficulties in classical semiotics that we might come around. That was the two comments.
Excellent, thank you for your answer, Lars. We have Enrico and then Jacopo. If you please could do this quickly, we still need to give the word to Marianne and Eamon. Thank you.
No, I think my question was kind of included in the discussion.
Sorry. Okay, thanks, Enrico.
I can pass to Jacopo.
Excellent, thank you. Jacopo.
Save time and no repeaters.
Hey, hi everyone. So that I think that the last point is very interesting because we are also doing something similar, like trying to develop like MIR algorithms that can be used for musicology, for computational musicology, rather than using Music 21, for example. And I wanted to ask you something. Don't you think that just okay, so developing interfaces is definitely important because it's kind of giving the possibility to these people to use extremely powerful tools, state-of-the-art MIR solutions. Don't you think that also the current state-of-the-art MIR solutions are designed just for performance, so just for achieving the best performance, rather than providing other features that can actually be more useful for musicologists, like, for example, explainability and other kind of things that will support an actual evaluation, rather than giving you the best results with the best performance? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't have all the answers to how you do this. I do think that some formats that are common now might change and be developed, and so yes, of course, I do think that there are many possibilities that many tools today don't really know. But I think you can use Music 21, for example. It will just have to integrate it in a way that just as one tool among others. Of course, you use NLTK as well. I mean, you can use the tools we have, but you just have to think ahead. The second thing is that I also think that preparing such a project or working in such a field, you have to specify things that you weren't used to specify. So in a classical article, for example, if it contains incoherences, it doesn't crash, but a computer program crashes if it is incoherent. And this is also a bit annoying for classical musicology, that we have to specify things that we weren't even used to specify, and it's a bit uncomfortable because it actually shows that we are not thinking clearly. So this backwards process, I think, is equally interesting, that it helps classical musicology just by trying to do it. So whatever the results, trying to specify things for a computer helps me as a classical musicologist. That was a part of the answer.
Excellent, thank you for that, Lars. I found that sentence fascinating. The fact that documents don't crash if they contain inconsistencies. We've done a little bit of work on that using ontologies and description logics, not specifically for music though, which I still think is a very kind of a very virgin area to do interesting research on. You know, if if time allows, because there's always lots to do. But thanks very much for that.
Just very quickly. When I studied model logic in the 90s, it was a problem. I mean, laws are very structured, and still there are inconsistencies. You cannot get away from them, and you have to modelize them in a way. So articles are a casino, and it doesn't. Yeah.
You know, and especially music, where, you know, sometimes breaking the rules is precisely what you should do, right? And especially related to what Ivan was mentioning before, right? That sometimes creativity only has to do with, well, not only has to do, but it in part has to do with breaking those rules and being inconsistent, and that's the substance of it, right? So
I think this is very very important. It is another big theme, I think, in our case. For example, I remember we had discussions with our with people in Polyphonia working with theories and ontologies and knowledge representations. How do, for example, they have the problem of representing things that are typical, but not necessarily always valid, or they're not necessarily constrained. So you cannot derive that a certain musical pattern or form is an instance of a specific theory, but at the same time, instances of those specific theories may not have that specific pattern or form. So it's a very difficult thing. There are branches of logic, for example, like the feasible logic, where you can deal with some exceptions and inconsistencies, and you but still, I think that there is a lot of work to be done there.
Excellent, thank you.
Marianne also left. She had to leave the meeting, but she left a note. Maybe it's interesting also for you and the rest of the group.
Oh yeah, that's great. I mean, Marianne,
I'll paste it into the notes.
Excellent, thank you, Enrico. Fantastic. Then Imon, if you want, I think you're the last one. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for having this meeting. I only heard about it at relatively short notice, so sorry I don't have any advance warning. I am recently joined Durham University Computer Science Department as assistant professor or lecturer. There are now 3 at the moment assistant professors in computer science working in digital humanities within the CS department there. Shortly we'll be joined too by another, so there's going to be a kind of a little cluster of people working on music within the context of digital humanities and computer science at Durham. I'm going to keep things brief, but I think this is a really interesting initiative. My own research, I started out as a musicologist or a music theorist, so my training is actually in musicology. I did a PhD in music theory in 2019. And I kind of started out my journey being really interested in computational models of music analysis and thinking I was going to, you know, write code and apply amazing data-driven musicology type approaches to new repertoires. But the longer I studied it, the more I got interested in the history of it. And I ended up writing a kind of more humanities style history of music theory dissertation, looking at the use of computers in the early part of the 20th century, 1950s, 1960s. So I'm really interested in a lot of the kind of epistemological or philosophical questions that we kind of talked about a little bit earlier on. But I'm also kind of grounded as a practitioner. So I have this other more technical project looking at, in my case, computer vision applications to images of musical scores, looking at handwritten annotation extraction in that domain and trying to look at conductor scores and other marked up copies of scores. And the longer vision is, once we've cracked, if you like, the computer vision side of that problem, to link those annotations back to semantic representations of those scores. So there are very much 2 parallel tracks. I think both are complementary here to the work that is being proposed and a lot of the work that's been described. And I hope to be able to join the community more formally. And I really appreciate the chance to meet many of you all for the first time. Also, I'm Irish by extraction too, and I'm always keen to keep links open with not only Europe, but also the European Union more generally. So yeah, that's all from me, I think. I'll just actually, because it speaks, I don't normally do this, but because it speaks directly to the questions of creativity and AI and music and stuff, I gave a short presentation looking at the history of this in like the 1960s in particular. So I turned to history for answers to some of the questions that we looked at, and I've just copied the link into the chat. Again, not usually one for self-promotion, but this is actually immediately relevant to what we've just been speaking about, and it should give you a sense of the way I approach these problems in my own work. Thank you.
Fantastic. That's fascinating. Thanks, Simon. Thanks very much for the quick summary. I only have a very, very quick question about what you said on writing code and play. Does that include live coding? I only got to know live coding very recently. So does that have anything to do with it?
No, me too. I only got to know it very recently. I wouldn't consider myself very good or interested in, like, you know, saying that I'm a musician or a live coding musician. Yeah, but I think I would love to learn more about that. It doesn't include that right now. No, it's more on the kind of what are the play-like qualities of writing research code or, you know, doing research in general. But yeah, no, live coding is definitely something that hasn't come up just yet, but there's a role for AI in that. There's quite an interesting project, the Flukoma project. I think you might be familiar with that. I think it's at Huddersfield. They're looking at ways to address large corpora of musical sounds using some kind of machine learning and making them available for people in the moment of a live coding or, you know, in DAWs and stuff like this. But anyway, yeah. Maybe a little area we could explore. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Thanks. So I see in the chat, Francesca is asking, what is live coding? So live coding is a form of, I would call it an artistic performance, where you have code and music at the same time. And the idea of the performance is that you have this hacker, right, or the performer. He's in front of the audience, typically in a club or, you know, somewhere where people can move and dance. And then there is a projection on the screen of the code that the live performer is writing, and that code generates music. And then, you know, whenever he changes parts of the code, you know, typically you start with a blank screen and then he writes the first line, and the first line is just a very simple beat. And then, you know, he goes on and changing the code, and the music changes as the code changes. And, you know, it's a perform. So YouTube is full of, you know, live coding performers doing their thing. And I just find it fascinating. All right. So I think this concludes the round of introductions, and this was fascinating. I thought I really just wanted to keep talking with all of you about all the topics that you have introduced.
Maybe Jacopo and Andrea want to introduce themselves as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just because I know them, that doesn't mean that that they shouldn't. Absolutely. Andrea, Jacopo, please.
I'll go first. Andrea, if you want to go first, it's fine for me. So yeah, I'm Jacopo, and I work with Albert at King's College London. Before I did a PhD in computer science at the University of Manchester, and basically my research interests are mostly in music information retrieval, so the application of machine learning methods for music segmentation, so music structure analysis, music emotion recognition, music modeling, so sequence models for music and music generation. These are like the main topics, and now we are exploring how we can use the multimodality of music and the semantic representation to exploit all this information to improve the current methods, the interpretability and the performance of the current methods. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacopo. Andrea.
Hi, everyone. I am Andrea. I am a PhD student at the University of Bologna. And my research interests are mainly in music information retrieval and semantic web technologies. And I'm trying to find like connection points and interactions between these two fields. In particular, my PhD project is about extracting repeating structures from music, repeating patterns, and somehow meaningful patterns that can be meaningful both from a perceptual point of view and from a musicological point of view, and how to link them and how to make music classification looking at these recurring patterns.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrea. Thanks very much, both. So maybe this is a good point. Enrico, I think the only project that we are sort of left to talk about is Polyphonia itself. What do you think would be best? Shall we still introduce it, even if quickly, or shall we just jump and discuss the white paper?
No, I think we can do a quick introduction so that also we share what we have in mind, what's our background. So I won't assume that they know what is our specific interest and role in the project either. So so maybe I will say, yeah, let's have a quick introduction of Polyphonia, and,
okay.
And then we may have so hopefully there will be questions, and we'll have a quick discussion on this, and then we can move to the
paper. Okay.
Okay. Let's have left though, because I'm not considering time now.
So we have 23 minutes left.
It's not a lot, so maybe we can go very quick on Polyphonia, and why don't we just do that introducing ourselves? So you, Albert, may start. Okay. Yourself, and you talk a few words on Polyphonia, and then I'll do the same, and then we move to the white paper. So that we.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I think if we start with the slides, then we won't have.
Oh yeah, no, and also I think the discussion on the white paper is much more interesting anyway. Okay,
agreed. So, hi everyone, I'm Albert Moreno. I'm a lecturer in computer science at King's College London, and yeah. So as I was just saying with Enrico, the project that binds us is Polyphonia. Also, Andrea and Jacopo are working on it. We started this year. This is a project that got funded by the European Commission last year, and the idea of Polyphonia is to bring together European music cultural heritage and to discover unknown relationships between data sets that all relate to the history of music in Europe, right? So the intuition behind the project is that oftentimes you have really interesting and common insights between very, very, very different data sets, right? So and we have many, many different examples about this, but one of them is, for example, the fact that, you know, at some point in history, the French and the Dutch were not very good friends. So their governments were at war. But still in the Netherlands, French operas were being played in stages and theaters. And people really loved them. So there was this divide between, you know, political opinion and, you know, and sociocultural facts. And then still, you know, the fact that you might love the culture of the country that's threatening yours, which we thought is fascinating, and so on and so forth, right? So we're thinking on any kind of semantic similarity and semantic links between musical phenomena and social political phenomena, right? Or even, you know, relationships between musical events, right? And I don't know, chord progressions, sentiment suggested by harmony or by melody, and what's being mentioned in the lyrics. So, you know, and named entities being mentioned in the lyrics and what those named entities mean, and so on and so forth, right? So it's in the end, it's really about building this large knowledge representation, right? This large knowledge graph that may allow us to connect all these different but still interrelated data sets in European musical history. I think that's the kind of high level summary. And then we have many different areas in that, right? Because that obviously requires research in music information retrieval, in natural language processing, in knowledge representation. So, you know, we have a couple of work packages dealing with each of those. But that's the idea of Polyphonia. Enrico, do you want to maybe you can talk a little bit more about the pilot?
Yeah, okay. So as I think what Albert says is the key point of Polyphonia. So this idea that we can look into musical cultural heritage as a unique thing thanks to semantic web technologies and the web and knowledge graphs. Now, if we do that, so if you want to look at a cultural heritage, particularly music cultural heritage as a whole thing, then what problems arise? You know, clearly there are a huge amount of problems because we have a huge diversity of artifacts with a huge diversity of perspectives inside. So I think that one thing we are trying to tackle is precisely to develop case studies in which the essence of these problems can be arise, both from the theoretical perspective. For example, how do you model different perspectives and viewpoints on the same artifacts, but also on the pragmatic perspective, in the sense that how do you manage this diversity and the issues that arise when you want to integrate all this diversity of knowledge. And this relates to knowledge graph construction as a research space of the project. Yeah, so and the interesting thing is that we have a combination of expertises in the project. There were both humanists and musicologists. We have computer scientists, semantic web researchers. We have music information retrieval experts, and also people that have a feet in different places, including people that plays the guitar but are computer scientists and never have done any music information retrieval, or musicologists that are also ontology engineers, and they are developing ontologies representing musical theories of the past. So there is a very nice flavor of people, I would say.
Excellent, thanks, Enrico. I thought that was a super fair description of the profile of the kind of people that we have in the project. Thanks for that. So okay, so now we are really done with just putting on the table like all the topics and profiles and things that we find interesting. And for the last 15 minutes, I think it would be really valuable to I mean, obviously we don't need to get out of here with the draft, so that would be very optimistic. But below so in the notes at the very end, I just marked in orange all the topics that I thought were sort of arising from all of our introductions. And I think there are some interesting overlaps and things that we're all interested in. And at the same time, and maybe we can use this to sort of bootstrap the discussion if you're okay with it. I thought that one interesting way of thinking about these topics is in the perspective that's not being taken into account already in other fields of research, right? So for example, if we talk about, optical music recognition, well, there's an established field doing precisely that, right? Or if we talk about, using machine learning for music generation, well, there's also an established field for doing that, right? So I think it would perhaps be more interesting to think about what's that extra layer that we could contribute, right? So what makes us different from, say, what you would encounter in your typical Izmir conference, for example. I'm just saying Izmir because that's one that I've been to a couple of times. So, and I thought that there are a couple of such topics that we've been mentioning that are not typically addressed by those communities, but perhaps you feel differently. So one of those topics, please feel free, to just, Ivan, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on something because I was wondering why in machine learning and artificial intelligence, vision was so much ahead of music and sound, and even more of moving images. And I think the main reason is the temporal dimension. And I think it's something very crucial that I don't think it has been addressed a lot. Like, I think that as of now, there are some technologies and people are trying to apply them to various fields, but the temporal dimension, I might be missing some seminal papers that I don't know about, but I have a feeling that this dimension is really what it is about and what makes it more difficult for sound and music than it is for still images. And that's also what makes it difficult for videos and moving images. So I was just wondering if that shouldn't be something we could explore also in the white paper.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's an interesting observation. So my question to that would be, how would this be different, for example, from like, for example, like sequential models? They somewhat have into account I mean, they don't have explicit representations of time, but in general, I think they address some part of the problem of the temporal dimension, no? And I'm just saying this knowing very little of sequential models, and I'm looking at Jacopo. But no, but I agree that from a theoretical point of view, I think time is often just not addressed. That's an interesting topic.
I think Lars wants to say something about it.
Oh, right. Yeah, please go ahead.
If I can butt in there, just two things. One to that thing is, if things are represented as networks, which is, I think, an obvious possibility in our field, then you do actually have temporal networks as a representational form, so you can add time to it. It is possible. So that was that. My question, which is a new question, is that do we want every new project in our field to start on scratch, or do we want, if not, what is left after a project? Have Python objects, or what are we building on? Are we building on new ways of ontology, or for now it seems a bit like we always start on scratch with every new project?
Interesting. So
I think that's oh, sorry, maybe you want to go first.
No, I just wanted to clarify from this. Does this have to do with like long-term preservation, or is this about something else?
Yeah, if you discover some philosophical, some methodological, some practical ways of doing things, how can I build on that on my next project?
So I think your question is, how can we essentially, you think, maybe I think the interesting observation is that there is few reuse in the community of music and computer science. So one thing that hasn't been addressed enough so far is how the community builds reusable artifacts and reusable assets. Does it make sense?
Yes, well, some coding is reused, obviously, but on a more philosophical level, or more, yeah, is that the only way to reuse things?
So there is a problem of reusing both theories, methods, requirements, stories. I think that's a very interesting point, and this touches a core part of our Polyphonia project, because in that project I'm leading the technical board, whose objective is precisely to ensure that whatever output comes from the project is as much as possible reusable. And we are trying to tackle this problem with the idea of developing an ecosystem, meaning that the moment we develop things, which includes stories, requirements, tutorials, but specifically also code, data sets, methods, and we try to keep an eye on how these things are presented for reuse, and also clearly within the project. So making sure that there are clear links between requirements, toolkits, methods, and between components themselves and data sets, but also trying to reuse in a later stage the same methods on different data and alternative data sets, and vice versa, trying to shape data sets in multiple forms in order to fit different computing methods. And we hope by doing this exercise within Polyphonia to also do some research on how these assets how musicology research can better present their assets in a kind of open science fashion. So I think this is an important discussion that we still need to have anyway, because that's I'm just saying that we have a part of the project that is dedicated to that, but we haven't had any answers yet. So I think this is something that I'll be super happy to discuss in the white paper. I think this should be maybe one part of the white paper.
I absolutely agree with all you just said, Enrico. And I think there's also a big overlap between the Polyphonia ecosystem in this mission of enabling reusability of datasets, tools, methods, and the goal of this DARIAH Working Group, because it's in the very mission statement that we say, okay, we want to enable these these platforms for long-term preservation, for sharing, for reuse. So I think that's really at the core of it. I'm missing my train of thought because there was something else really important that I wanted to say. About the reusability of all these resources. Anyway, it will come back because it was important. Right. So yes, now I got it. And I give the word to you, Jacopo. So I think one very interesting aspect that I haven't seen anywhere that this kind of sharing platforms enables, at least for the topic of AI and music, is dataset search. So I think when you search for data and when you search for tools, music just has these very particular ways. It might just be, additional features, sure, but people searching for musical resources have very specific requirements. So I wouldn't be surprised that we need specific dataset search methods for for helping researchers finding their way in this sort of vision platform for the sharing of datasets and methods that Enrico just portrayed. Okay, that's what I wanted to say. Jacopo, go ahead.
Thanks, Albert. Just wanted to say a couple of things. The first one is related, is connecting what Ivan was saying before, so the difficulty to deal with the temporal aspect of music, and what Albert was saying in relation to Ivan's, so how to evaluate creativity, So this is actually, there is a point in common. For example, the generative system of music, they have this problem of learning long-term dependencies. And so one of the key things is how to automatically evaluate the ability of this system to generate music with structure. So with structural coherence, structural consistency. So I guess one of the key point is how do we automatically evaluate music generation systems to go from qualitative evaluation to quantitative evaluation, how we can design metrics that can describe musical properties that would be only this could only be described at the moment with an expert analysis of the music. And the second thing is related to reusability and very connected to what we are doing in Polyphony as well. So for example, in NLP, so I'm technically biased, but in NLP, you can take a model, for example, you can take BERT or whatever, and you can just use embeddings on text. But in music, you cannot do this. So maybe reusability also in that aspect. So basically having some embedding models or BERT model, transformers, whatever, that can actually be used in the context of music, symbolic music, audio music, for different properties. That would be something that is probably missing in the literature as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jacopo. I think that's really cool, and it, in a way, it's similar to what we were saying about dataset search and what makes working with music distinctive from, for example, working with text. And I think that is something that would help a lot of researchers in the, in areas of AI and music, just understanding why BERT cannot work out of the box for music representations. And what is this gap exactly, right? So what is it exactly that makes working with musical data different from working with textual corpora, for example? So I think that's one aspect that we should definitely touch upon in the paper. In a way, I'm seeing this like and please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just thinking out loud. But this seems to me like a lot of well-established practices in other fields, like for example the FAIR data principles, the big platforms for tool resharing, workflow systems like Elixir and Taverna. But we're thinking about all of this in the particular case of music, right? So what happens when you have musical data? What happens when you have musical requirements? What happens when you have musical users, right? And how do all these supposedly generic ways of sharing data and software need to be adapted for the musical case?
Lars.
I just thought, if we want a semantic web in our field, what would that be? And maybe one problem with semantic webs is that they aren't detailed enough. But if we imagine like what they're doing in the Norwegian National Library now, that they digitalized everything and they optically recognized every word in everything. So you have an API to the library. You cannot access the whole book because it's copyrighted and things, but you can, with the API, you can do research anyway. So what I miss is that all libraries give access to all the notes, all the clefs, all the sound notes in a sound recording and everything. And all the details are in the semantic web. That would be a fantastic thing, and access it with an API. And another thing that would be fantastic, my university just lent me a GPU 800 for 2 months with an engineer, which was hello, what would I have to pay for this? Such resources, if we can divide those a bit, both data storage, but also computer power, that would also be a community thing, I think.
So how do
with the CNRS, we have this type of resources that we can access if we need them. So we can have like huge spaces for storage, and we can have huge calculation power. We just need to write like a proposal and describe the project, and then we can access these resources, and it's free because I'm a member of CNRS.
So I think this is a really good point, and I never thought of it for music and musicology. But biologists are really, really good at this. So they have these platform called Galaxy, I think, and they don't even see the resources. It's shared and distributed, and then they go there and work on their workflows, and the whole thing is executed somewhere. And I think they have specific deals with specific universities to provide access. But the aspect of sharing infrastructure, I think it's just going to become more and more prevalent as we are all going to need more GPUs and TPUs for doing research.
So I think infrastructure is another key theme for the white paper, I would say.
Another thing, if we're really talking about AI, I see, if we could have such a structure that is open and with access and things, I see some AI worms crawling around the system when none of us is doing research. So it's generating more more clustering, and this takes time, so it should be happening even if we're not telling it to. Sort of common ways of doing research for all the data that we have access to. This should be a common thing to have access one of these worms at any time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Something we mentioned at the beginning, I think when Ivan was presenting, was the topic of ethics, because I think music has also quite a unique perspective on ethics, and what does it mean to do ethical research, or to build an ethical musical agent. So I think this might be also a good opportunity, because I don't think there is a lot of people thinking about ethical implications of using AI in music.
Yeah, there are people working on AI and ethics, but not specifically for music. And I think there is a very interesting original point of view here.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, it somewhat has also to do with the fact of storing large repositories of musical data. What will, models learn if they only learn from those data? What kind of implications for the music generation that will have? So I think at this meta level I think we're just discussing data and typical issues about data. It's just that for music, I think the ramifications just go deeper in a way, and go in a very idiosyncratic way that communities don't very often think about. So Francesca is throwing the link on the DARIAH Working Group on ethics in the humanities. So I think that would be fantastic. So I think we should absolutely involve them in the discussion. All right, so in the interest of time, because it's 2 minutes past, and I know we all have other things to do after this, I would like to close the discussion here. I think it would be a great idea to follow up on this in the Google group. So what I propose is that Enrico and I just throw a message there with a summary of what we discussed today, and try to involve the rest of the community. And then we use that platform to discuss where do we want to bring this. There is no, we haven't discussed specific goals, whether this will end up in archive or we will submit it to AAAI, right? But I don't think there's need for this, because, this is just about the soup of the discussion. So if you agree, we'll continue the discussion there. Okay, fantastic. I see lots of noise.
I just wanted to add, because like in the these last 5 minutes, we discussed about the ethics, and I introduced this DARIAH Working Group on ethics and legalities in the arts and humanities. So they are having their kind of open meetings like this one at the end of October, on the 27th. So of October at 10:30. Yeah, it is a Wednesday, it's not a Thursday. So I don't know if you would like to join. Maybe it would be a nice place to introduce yourself and start exchanging on these and see what they do, and maybe see if it's interesting to you at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much for that, Francesca. Do you have a link for this meeting?
I have the link for the registration. Let me share it with you. So I shared with you a minute ago the link to their Hypothesis blog, and this is the link for the registration. So it will be on the 27th of October, 10:30 Central European Time, 2:12, like now, basically.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Thank you for that, Francesca. Okay, then it's 5 past, so I'll really would like to wrap up here. Francesca, is there anything else that we need to do?
No, not at all. No. So we recorded this session, so we can share the recording, or if you all agree, we can upload it on the DARIAH YouTube channel. And that's it. So great to see that this was such a a productive and rich meeting with a lot of people, new people also from different fields. So I'm really glad.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I thought it was a very, very interesting discussion. So thank you very much, all of you, for being here today. We'll share the resources on the list, and we hope to see you all again soon.